Welcome back to Overland Stories, where we're covering the Honey Badger Diaries and James and Mira attempting to cover 14 countries in Africa. In this episode, we're discussing man-eating lions, marital advice, how to stay together in a confined space for the amount of time that they did. Africa trip wouldn't be an Africa trip if you get locked up at least once, and everything's trying to eat the two of them, whether it be this big to that big. Let's see how they get on. This is their story. So now you're there. You've arrived in Nairobi. What's the plan? You know, what's your plan? Obviously, you've been given all these various itinerary from your people that from the wedding, but you obviously had to put down, or maybe things had some expiry date, or it's best time to go ballooning in X time of winter or summer or anything like that. So how did you put this plan together?
And that was what's interesting, is we had this whole plan on the basis that, you know, again, so what's that thing that Mike Tyson says is that everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yes,
absolutely true. I mean, we went there thinking we're going to have, you know, the Masai Mara at this time of the year, and the gorillas at this time of the year, and everything was set up on the basis of weather. I mean, that's genuinely how we actually organize our entire itinerary.
Because it's only 300 kilometers away, so it should only be 3 hours, right?
You got it. But of course, that made no difference at the end, because also in addition to that, we had a whole month delay in Mombasa. So everything we had planned was skewed for a month. The only real deadlines we had in place were my sister was planning to come and visit us in Uganda, and she had a certain time frame that she had to be there. So we just had to work. And then again, your parents in Botswana at a later stage.
Yeah. I think there was the migration.
The big things
in the Masai Mara we had to do a couple of people visiting at certain times, and then the volunteer work where we booked it in advance, where we kind of had to commit to certain dates.
But those were always doable.
But yeah, ultimately my approach to these things is to plan the hell out of it, and to know, you know, on this day at that time you're going to be in this place.
Yeah.
And plan out the route in detail. But actually, it was quite nice not doing that.
Following. We did it, but we didn't follow it. So
yeah, exactly. It was nice to have that as a kind of rough structure. This is roughly what we're doing. But we quickly realised that what we thought was good to see changed. Because when you're in a place or you're in a country, people will say, oh, you must go and see this, oh, you must go and do that. And you learn a lot more about what you want to see.
Well, Google is not available for Africa. You can't go and say, I want to Google, okay, I suppose Nairobi, let's take Nairobi out of the picture, or any of the major cities, take them out of the picture. But once you go through Naivasha and you're going through the Rift Valley over there, you can't just go and Google and say, what's interesting to see? The locals will tell you massive waterfall. There's this, and that's
exactly.
not part of any.
And also other overlanders. I mean, that was the other thing. So, for example, one of the things that we didn't really have huge plans for was Turkana, Lake Turkana in Kenya.
Oh wow, yes.
Which was probably one of the definitely on the top 5 of our experiences whilst we were there. And that was simply, we'd arrived into Nairobi, we were fixing up the car a bit and trying to sort out our lives just slightly. Luckily had an Ethiopia visa that we got in the UAE beforehand, because apparently it was impossible to try and get a visa whilst you're in Nairobi to get into Ethiopia at the time. And then we met a whole bunch of overlanders, and one couple who were these South African, much older, I mean, in their 70s, retired couple who were heading into Turkana, and we were talking about it ourselves and thought, okay, well, why don't we just start convoying together and heading in that direction when we're ready? And so our entire plan, we had planned to get to Ethiopia, but we hadn't really thought about doing Lake Turkana in the same way that we had. And that was just brilliant. Again, kind of expected, planned. And
that worked out really well, because they were a bit concerned about security up Lake Turkana. It can be a bit dodgy.
Yeah. Especially at that time as well, because of the conflict over there in southern Ethiopia was also.
Yeah. So they wanted to go and I think, not that it made any difference, but I think they quite liked the fact that I'd been in the army, and I thought, yeah, okay, fine, we'll go with these guys. We got a lot more out of that relationship, because these guys are South Africans who've been overlanding their whole lives.
Yeah.
We'd learnt on the way to Nairobi from Mombasa, we'd learnt quite how dangerous Africa can be, which is another whole in itself. But we were quite shocked, but when we arrived in Nairobi, and thought, we've bitten off more than we can chew here.
Yeah, it is daunting when you start your trip, but once you get into the trip and you start relaxing, all of a sudden your driving style changes. A lorry bearing down at you at 80 kilometers per hour on the wrong side of the road is natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
And once you get that
and the crabbing
road and you relax, the trip starts really.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And I take my hat off to you going straight Nairobi, and you went straight to Ethiopia. And that is a fantastic road, especially with border crossing.
Yeah, it's probably one of those very few places where it genuinely felt like a true adventure. Like you are literally in the middle of nowhere for a good 10 days, I would say. I mean, we took our time, but it was, and that was started in you're saying Naivasha, but like just above that is Laikipia, is it Laikipia Plateau or something like that? Yeah. And that's where we started the whole trip right through to, and you're going through just all the tribes, the Samburus, and then the Rendile, and then the actual Turkana, and it's just it's so surreal and
it
just
really
such a cool experience.
And also, it was the longest trip where we had 220 liters of petrol with us, and we knew it wasn't going to last. That could do us 1,000 kilometers.
Yes.
But it was longer than 1,000 kilometers where we needed to go.
And that road is insane. I mean, and you're so slow through that road. The corrugation getting closer to Ethiopia,
and you lose the road. Like the road just, and we were just driving through riverbeds, like wandering, we had tracks for Africa, which was essential.
Brilliant.
But we were just kind of zigzagging where the trek is supposed to be, but it just wasn't.
Yeah.
A lot of guessing.
So yeah, that was quite spectacular. I mean, the tribes and the stuff that they wear and the things that they do were, that stereotypical imaginary Africa. That's actually it.
That was exactly that.
So I want to take us back in time a little bit. I mentioned in Nairobi that we'd had a few shockers, and essentially when we got the car in Mombasa, we'd unpacked it, we repacked it, we're good to go. We just wanted to get into a national park. We were done with grenade bombs in Mombasa, and we wanted to go and see some lions. So Savo East is a beautiful national park, bang in the middle of Mombasa and Nairobi. So we headed there. We didn't realize at the time, but Out of Africa was set there. Yeah. And when they were building the railways, a lot of people got eaten by man-eating lions there.
A whole movie about that.
Oh yeah. So off we went, and I was in a bit of a hurry, and we got stopped by the police.
Okay.
And
This was 2 hours into our trip, by the way.
Yeah.
So literally, as soon as we hit the roads.
And I was determined. We knew that bribes were going to be a thing. And you meet some people who are like, yeah, I've never paid a bribe in my life. I've been driving through Africa all my life. I've never paid. I was like, well, I like that approach. I'm not going to pay either.
Yeah.
And that didn't work out for me, I'm afraid. And I went to jail.
Oh, you went to jail?
Yeah. I refused to pay. They wanted
10,000. What's that? Kenyan 10,000
Kenyan shillings. Yeah.
Which is
was about $100.
$100.
Yeah.
Still, it's a lot. And so I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And when we got to jail, they put me in a cell, and they said, and Mira heard, you're in jail because you're speeding. And they said, we said, well, what's the speed limit? And they said 80 for commercial vehicles. And of course, we weren't in a commercial vehicle; we were on our own, and it was 100. We were caught doing 96 or something like that. And luckily, because they'd said it in public, and there were a whole bunch of people around, because we had the paperwork saying this is a private vehicle. You had to get that when you get your insurance in Kenya.
Yeah.
Showed it to them again publicly, and then they.
No, sorry, I showed it to them whilst James was stuck in jail. I was dealing with police at that point.
It must have been hard for you. I was just chilling in jail at that point, just enjoying myself. So we did, and as a result, of course, we arrived in Savo East a little bit later than expected. And at this point, we'd both been on safaris, but in South Africa, where safaris just aren't the same.
You're with.
And so we kind of got in. We drove around a bit. The sun was setting. Thought, let's go to the campsite. And we arrived, and there was no one there at all. There was like a little shed with a loo in it, and other than that, it was just us. This is perfect. This is just what we want. So we built a campfire. Mira cooked an amazing dinner. She was getting attacked by baboons, so that was our first learning process. That a bit like they were scared of me, but they wanted a piece of Mira.
And it's not like what we had for dinner that night.
So we had that, and then we just opened a bottle of wine, and Mira said, "Look, I need to go to the loo, to the toilet. Can you come with me in case the baboons come out?" Of course, they wouldn't at night, but we didn't know that. So off we went. And on the way back, we were just walking back to the car, and I guess the car was 50 meters away, not far. And I had this massive torch that I'd been given by Rahal at the time. It had 3,500 lumens.
Oh,
and I was shining big beam. And suddenly there was a lioness, and we were on foot, and she was 10 meters away, like properly close to us.
Literally staring us in the face, and we're staring right at her.
And Amira just didn't think. She just ran straight back to the loo. And I was standing there thinking, if you run, they chase you, so I'm just going to think about it.
Yeah.
I remember so clearly in my head, watching these documentaries, you never see one lioness hunting on her own. There's always a few.
It's always
so I can dazzle. Right, so I can dazzle this one with my torch, but I can't dazzle her mates. So then I ran, and we got back to the. Of course, there wasn't a proper door; it was like a flap. So we found these old kind of gallon water containers, and they were all empty. We just barricaded the door up with those.
Thinking that's going to really protect us.
And I said to Mira, I was like, right, we are staying here tonight. And by some miracle, I mean, you were talking about Google earlier. We had our phone on us, and we did have data. So we just Googled the number of the range warden and called him and said, look, we're in this campsite. There's a lion outside trying to eat us. And he sent some guys, and they cleared out the campsite.
Oh, wow.
And so we didn't get eaten, but I have to say...
But you did shit yourself.
Yeah. I mean,
we're in the right spot for that.
That left a scar in my head. There were, every time after that in a national park, sun setting, sure, go out for a game drive, and then you're in that tent.
Yeah.
Like there's sitting about.
Yeah.
We sometimes did when we felt safe or there was water nearby, like when we knew where a lion would come from and we could look. But on the whole, sunset,
most safaris,
bedtime.
yeah. Very early learning lesson. It's a very different experience camping in the wild in the UAE, where you can stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning having a chat. It doesn't work that way there. So.
And it didn't stop there. So the following morning, Mira, as she got up, going down the ladder, she heard the baboons going crazy, and then saw a leopard.
So.
And then we drove off to Savo West and camped at this beautiful spot near a lake, and got woken up in the middle of the night with elephants scratching on the car. Of course, we're sleeping on the car.
Yeah.
That was more terrifying for me than the lions. I think I was like having an adrenaline rush with the lions, but with the elephants, they were literally rubbing against the car, and you could hear that rumble.
Yeah, we could have like stroked them out of the window.
Yeah. So that still terrifies me now.
So there was that, and then I woke up that morning and I had a tick in my stomach. And then we could see Kilimanjaro from there, so I went for a drone flight and dropped it in the lake. And then had to like wade out when there were hippos just around the corner to go and get my drone. And so when we arrived later that day in Nairobi, we were like, okay, this is a bit more hardcore than we'd expected.
We don't know what the hell we got ourselves into, basically. No.
You've run away from the grenades straight into the African deepest, darkest African heart.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely
brutal. So when we met Fricky and Fiona, who'd been overlanding all their lives, we were just like, yes, please let us cling on. And we stayed with them for probably another month, didn't we?
We'd done Ethiopia, came back down, and then finished Masai Mara, because that's how we arranged with the planning. We figured, okay, well, if we're going to delay, we'll just delay slightly more so that we're within the cusp, and actually got very lucky at the Masai as well, and got to see over maybe 10,000 wildebeest crossing a river twice in 2 different books, which was, I think we actually have a photo of it up here. No, they're not here. But it was one of those experiences that was also amazing. And so that's when we broke off with the freaking Fiona. So it was a good month and a half, maybe 2 almost. And then we went straight into Uganda, which is where we met my sister. So that was the first kind of family holiday.
Yeah, I think the most dangerous part of that first story you told me there is the tick in your tummy, mate.
Yeah.
Which at the time you probably realized, well, the elephants, the lion, all of that was dangerous. But now you've spent a month and a half with people that have toured through Africa, and you realize, well, the tick was probably the most dangerous animal that you had on that first week excursion.
It's the small stuff, honestly. It's like you say, the mosquitoes, the ticks.
Actually, on the subject of the tick, we as we were going up through Lake Turkana, we were looking for a campsite, and Tracks for Africa had this place that was off the road, like 20 kilometers off. Yeah. Which is insane because there is nothing off that track. Oh. And so we thought, well, let's go check out this place called the Desert Rose. Yeah. And I mean, it was just extraordinary. We arrived basically at the bottom of this cliff, and the track was like, yeah, keep going. And so we just thought, you know what, let's just see. And a little bit scary, actually. I mean, it was quite a tough track getting up there. And we arrived, and there was this beautiful wooden house.
It's a lodge. It's
carved.
These, like, exclusive lodges.
It was spectacular.
Or, like high end, but it was closed for the season.
It was closed for the season, and people normally don't drive up. There's like a helipad where people would fly in. I mean, it's not luxury like there was no electricity. It was all kind of run off carbon. But just beautifully carved, sculpted lodge just out of this cliffside. And there was a waterfall nearby, and we thought, well, let's go and have a play. And there was this bit of rock that looked a bit like a slide. I was like, hey, Mira, why don't you slide down there?
I forgot about this.
So off she went. She's quite brave. And at the bottom, she just kind of stood up, and she was like
freaking
playing around her like bum and all that shit. And I went and had a look, and there must have been 100 leeches in her pants.
Like little tiny, they're really tiny little black leeches.
And so the pants came off, and we were both there just trying to kind of scrub these things.
They're not that easy to remove, though.
No, it was quick enough to be able to like just sweep them off.
It was so quick. They had really caught
Only
grip
one
at
or
that
two
point.
really. And
Yeah.
she caught Ellen. That was not a nice experience.
Take out
yeah,
the
there's-
lighter. You got to take out the lighter or the matches and just hold it up there for a while, and then they let go. It's not
That
fun.
was so bad. Yeah, that was not a nice experience at all. Again, one of those, oh, it's just a waterfall. No, you're freaking Africa. It's not just a waterfall.
But that was extraordinary, actually. That place, that really,
that was-
it was like a dream, like an oasis, just in the middle of nowhere. Just appeared this beautiful. I'd love to go back actually again. I really would.
With a bit more money.
Ideally, yeah, when it's open.
On the helicopter pad. Yeah.
But
That was good stuff.
yeah, I mean, on the whole, to be honest, the people were the greatest risk on that whole trip.
Yeah.
More than any animal or insect. We got malaria. We got bitten by various things.
What you got?
Did get bitten by a lion as well, but it was playing rather than trying to eat me.
Yeah. In
but no,
the petting
people
places, not playing with the wildlife. Just be clear on that one.
But Ethiopia is in a whole other league.
Food,
Everything,
people,
the culture, the politics. It's just
probably some of the
so
nicest people we met,
extraordinary.
though. I would say Ethiopia.
I would say so. I mean, the people are just because they were never really properly colonized.
Yeah.
There's just much more heritage. There's much more sense of national pride. Much less resentment
Gondola.
of kind of Westerners.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say that they look down on Westerners, which was just quite refreshing. It was quite nice to see, to be honest. So yeah, that was extraordinary, Ethiopia, and that's where the car broke properly for the first time in the Omo Valley.
Yeah.
Yeah, the front diff gave up on us. I wish I'd known that's what it was. I was kind of poking around the disc brakes.
Wow.
But we'd just been to see the Mercy tribe.
I'm just looking through the book as we're speaking. So.
There we go.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see that, but these are the guys that put these lip plates in.
Yeah.
For the names of the places in Ethiopia.
And we were going off to go and see a wedding with the Hammer tribe, which is a bit brutal actually. The men have to run over bulls and then they flog the women. So all of the women have these kind of scars all over their backs. We weren't too keen to see that, but they're running over bulls we were.
Yeah.
So we were driving fast to go and catch this wedding before it happened. And the front wheels just both seized up. I was doing 100 kilometers an hour down this track, and it just stopped. And on that trip, we were attacked by a black mamba as well. That was interesting. It kind of we were going fast, and it just came out, reared up, and they can come up quite high.
Yeah.
Just went for the side of the car and then disappeared.
Yeah.
And so we were terrified.
2/3 of his body. And he can still do almost 60 kilometers per hour on 1/3 of his body touching the ground.
Crazy. So as we were driving, we saw it coming up, and we're like, "What is that snake doing?" And then literally, obviously we were driving, so it was nowhere near us. But
no, I mean he came in like near the front left wheel.
Yeah.
And I thought he was going to be under the bonnet in the engine bay.
Yeah.
From again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he hit the car, he probably had a nice surprise.
Yeah. We were going fast, but yeah. So the two wheels froze, and here we were in the Omo Valley. I think the National Geographic calls it Africa's last frontier. Proper arse end of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I'm not a mechanic. I love the idea of mechanics, and I wanted to go on courses, but there's no such thing in Dubai. You can't learn to be a mechanic here. So I watched YouTube, and that was about it. And I was poking around trying to figure out how to get these front wheels turning again. And as seems to be the case, always happens in Africa, some guy rocked up on his bike. Oh, I'm a mechanic.
Yeah.
And normally, to be fair, they're not, and they just want to give the car a good bashing with a hammer. But this guy managed to get the wheels turning, and so there was a problem with the front diff. So we went back to his garage. He took the diff apart and then threw it in a fire, which at the time seemed a bit weird, but in hindsight, I realized he was trying to make the metal expand so that he could pull the bits apart. but didn't work. So he stuck the whole diff in the back of the car, and then had to drive 1,000 kilometers to the nearest Toyota dealership to buy another diff.
And that was a terrible, terrible road as well.
It was.
That was.
It was rainy season, and so it was just mud. And of course, we only had two-wheel drive
everywhere. Two-wheel drive. I think it was 11 hours straight. No, that was the longest drive, isn't it? That was a 13-hour drive in one go, because we couldn't really stop. We just thought, let's just make it to where we need to be, and that was, I think it was Addis, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Addis Ababa. Yeah.
So it was miserable, actually. So yeah, there are good days and bad days.
Yeah, that was one of those occasions actually where we tried to find the nicest hotel that we could find, just so that we could clean them, sleep in a bed, have air conditioning. In fact, as it was still a pretty grubby hotel, but it was just, we just needed to time out, if you like.
I think that's the key when doing these long trips, is that you do reward yourself every now and then. That doesn't matter what, it doesn't have to be a 5-star, but you reward yourself, get out there, get your washing done, give the car a break, clean everything out, unpack it, and it gives you 2 to 3 days just to, because as beautiful as everybody perceives an overland trip, and I want to get in my vehicle, I want to tour through Africa, it's hard work, and it's every single day you're going, and you're relying on only the two of you, and eventually that also starts causing kind of a rift between the two of you, because you got your things to do, Mira's got her things to do. You have to slow down and take a break for a couple of days.
It was just blissful love throughout the whole, not one argument. Yeah, I think
Ethiopia was the point where we both talked about divorce.
I think the word divorce came up 4 times in that first couple of months.
It was after the whole diff issue and coming back into Kenya that I think we finally kind of got into a bit of a rhythm, and we were able to kind of split our time and understand who's got what and how to manage our. But you're right. If we didn't stop I would say every 2 weeks was our absolute maximum. After 2 weeks, we had to stop for 2 or 3 days, either in a really nice campsite where we could just take everything out and clean. And do the washing and just be out of a car, or find a friend who we can stay with, or a slightly better hotel. Like, it wasn't, again, most of the time it was hostels, not hotels, but it was something that was just outside the car. But 2 weeks was probably the longest we went without really fully stopping for, I would say, 2 days. We always just needed about 2 days of a break, and then we were ready to go.
But that's it. I mean, it does take you time, and you mentioned, taking to find your rhythm, and everybody's got a task. Doesn't matter what the task is. It doesn't matter whether you're good at reading maps or not, but everybody picks up a task that they're good at and keeps them busy. Because otherwise, if one person's doing everything in the vehicle, if James is driving and he's navigating and he's doing everything, he's going to start getting frustrated when he misses the road. And vice versa, same as when you're driving, because you did quite a fair amount of driving on this trip as well, Mira.
Not as much as, I think James was by far the 85% more.
No, I'd say 95%.
Okay.
Barely any. He didn't really want me to drive. I don't really want to drive. So I would say only when he was really sick, in 2 occasions, did I did the driving.
Yeah.
And then when it was easier, like in Namibia or
when I had malaria.
Malaria. It wasn't malaria.
Malaria.
We just kind of, you're exactly right. You kind of find what you're good at and you fit into those slots.
Yeah.
And it ended up being quite sexist, I guess, because I was doing fixing stuff and navigating and planning the routes and driving. Mira was doing the cooking. And it took a while. It took, those 2 months where, Mira, for example, is messy. And you can't be messy in a car. Like, everything has to have its place. Otherwise, you're just wasting time looking for things. And
it goes when something goes missing, and your 76 and my 76, they're pretty packed. It goes missing for years.
Yeah, literally
years.
Even now, I'll start digging and go, I completely forgot I had that.
We lost an iPhone and found an iPhone 3 years later. We thought we had lost it in the desert. And I had the iPhone. I actually pulled out the cubby hole. Right behind it is, you go in and to clean your AC, there's an AC filter behind the cubby hole. And as I popped that thing off, this phone fell out.
Oh my God, wow.
Yeah.
It was about 1.5 years, 2 years, but she thought she'd lost it in the desert. Meanwhile, it was actually in the car. The battery had died, so we couldn't phone it, but there we go.
Yeah. And that's the point. Like everything has to be in its right place, and so and then I suppose the irritating thing for Mira about me is I perhaps took more risks than she would have liked, and I till this day I still maintain that if I hadn't done that, then there would be a lot of adventure that we'd missed out on.
Yes.
And there were often when I'd be like, I told you so, but it was probably my fault. The car broke down a lot because we just drove it probably a bit too hard. But after the
word with you, I know that you do tend to decide, well, hang on a second, I can go around there, it's going to take me 5 minutes longer, but let me just go down here, or let me just go up here, that's fine.
No thought process, really. Again, the whole planning, forget it. And so, and there were plenty of occasions where, one specifically that I will never forget, which was in Zimbabwe, where we got, in a matter of, I would say, matter of maybe 15 hours, we got stuck probably 30 times, and we were in mud right up to the top of the wheel.
Oh, this is the Gorongosa.
4 o'clock in the morning, miserable, like literally fishing around in a national park, and just completely covered in like thick mud. And just miserable.
That was a horrible
occasion. And that was because James was, even though it was a rainy season and the national park was closed, thought, fuck it, let's take this risk and drive through the rainy season in Gorongosa in Zimbabwe. I mean, like, well, who cares?
I mean, we didn't, to be fair, we didn't know it was, we didn't know it was closed. And what we always, with any national park, there was always like a main entrance.
Okay.
And we tried to, I mean, you can do everything that we did, in terms of the bigger journeys on roads, quite easily now. And we just tried not to, unless we were in a hurry or whatever. We always wanted to find a little back route or a track or something that might have a nice view. And that's what we'd done this day. And it was rainy season in Zimbabwe. And I found this beautiful track that went for miles and miles and miles. No roads. And it was kind of one of these progressive spirals that started off being, oh, that's pretty exciting, let's try that. Yeah. I think the first one was the track ended and we just drove through some trees and then arrived at this riverbed with quite a steep little bank on both sides. We're like, let's just try that. And it worked fine, but we were kind of committed. We couldn't really go back at that point. And then the mud came, and eventually we found some park rangers who were stuck themselves. And they said, what are you doing here? It's closed. And we hadn't been through a gate. There was no entrance. So we didn't know. And then we just slid and slided around, losing tracks. It was 24 hours of stuff.
24 hours in the end, yeah, but like literally, I would say like 13, 14 hours of us actually out of the car, winching to something, digging, getting the tracks off, getting the tracks back on.
In the middle of the night when you got to go and tie the winch around a bush and you don't know if there's a lion, don't know if there's a snake.
Snakes,
I'm too tired. And you're just covered in mud. Everything inside the car, outside the car. That was a horrible experience.
But then again, his risk also gave us like opportunities, like he said, where we would have never had, experienced some awesome things. And Namibia
I think a lot of people just do stick to the main roads and they go off-road only in the national parks. And I'm similar to you. I would prefer to take the dusty road all the way through than taking the tarmac all the way up. And okay, I get it. With the big overland trucks, they don't really have much choices. They stick to the big roads and off they go, and then they get to the national parks if they're allowed in with the big trucks. But you're there for the adventure, and yes, it does become a bit
risky,
trying when you're 24 hours and you're stuck. But it's part of the adventure. Obviously you don't want to go and break your car.